Hello, everybody. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you, as always. And by the end of today's episode of Newsflash, you will know, first, what the hell is going on with this Trump, New York City, Manhattan federal judge hush money case that had jury interviews yesterday and today. We'll give you the full updates and why the prosecutors, the team trying to get Trump behind bars, just had a pretty major win in court today. Also, you will know by the end of today's Newsflash episode what is going on with our efforts to send more money to Ukraine and Israel at the moment, who's supporting him in both houses of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, set to be pretty divided over this. Also, you will know what the United States tried to do to protect Israel with regards to the Iranian retaliation, and why the New York Times is back in the news yet again for another egregious instance of pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian bias. All right, so we have to start, though, with this legal trial here. Essentially, this is the New York hush money case. If you remember, it was the first case that Trump got arrested for. This is the one where, the famous images of... This is not where the mugshot came out of. That was the Georgia election case. But this is the pre-2016 election case, the first one that he was, really sent to court for. And this was put by Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor in New York, essentially accusing him of, this $130,000 hush money payment that Trump's fixer, Michael Cohen, made before the 2016 election to Stormy Daniels. Essentially, this was viewed as an in-kind campaign contribution that was essentially viewed as an in-kind campaign contribution that was not declared. That was the first part of it. But the second part of it was this kind of raised up, they were able to, find this. They were able to find other efforts, essentially, that Trump made. And this was kind of the big win that they had today. They already had the indictment of this felony, which was always kind of a stretch to raise it from just kind of a misdemeanor to a felony, but a felony instance of just not declaring an in-kind campaign contribution, which is what Michael Cohen, which, Trump later reimbursed him, or did he? That's still kind of unclear about whether Michael Cohen making this payment to Stormy Daniels to make this embarrassing story about Trump having sex with a porn star go away. That was reviewed as a campaign contribution that he did not declare, so he got hit for that. And he also got hit for, this is the big development today, was that the prosecutors accepted all these other things that Trump, or the prosecutor essentially argued that all these other things that Trump did, including, various meetings, various emails, various instances of aides putting pressure on media outlets to kind of undercut this story, including, another hush money payment that was for, I believe, a little bit less money that Trump made to a Playboy model named Karen McDougal in a similar situation. All that was kind of added in and factored as a potential just general conspiracy to influence the election. The thing about that is, as Trump's lawyers said, that nothing wrong with that, is nothing in that part of the equation is illegal, and so it shouldn't really be put in. But the judge essentially saw that and said, well, if nothing's legal, you should have no problem putting it in because it'll get immediately swatted down. So that was put in as a broader case that the prosecutors are trying to make, that Trump used all the, used improper campaign contributions and kind of, improper pressure essentially to influence the course of the election. And this really reflects the fact that his 2016 kind of tactics just generally are on trial, which is one of them being, of course, the catch and kill relationship with the National Enquirer and David Pecker, who's expected to appear as a witness. Where the catch and kill being they would catch or they would buy the rights to the story. Trump and kind of in close concert with the National Enquirer would David Pecker would come out with the with Trump kind of supporting him and say, here, vulnerable woman, let me buy the rights to the story. We'll report it in a fair, accurate way, essentially never intending to do so and killing the story because they, own the exclusive rights to it, which is kind of a, fucked up thing that you can just buy the rights to an entire story. But that's how it works legally, and that's, a big strategy they were able to do to try and kill a lot of this stuff. Another result of the meeting, though, Steinglass, who's the prosecutor, said, were explosive headlines that Trump's opponents in the Republican primary, including those that Ben Carson had, including those claiming that Ben Carson had committed a medical malpractice, act, I guess, during his time as a brain surgeon, that Senator Ted Cruz had the JFK assassination connection through his family, all that crazy stuff that everyone kind of laughed at, but was a kind of a big deal at the time. The prosecutors now today, as this has been argued, are essentially able to put that in the case to the jury that Trump improperly tried to manipulate the election. Essentially, that is really the big part of it all. So yeah, it's all accused of stemming though from that $130,000 hush money payment that Michael Cohen made to Stormy Daniels. But prosecutors say that the deals that show that Trump orchestrated a wide-ranging scheme to influence the 2016 presidential election. So Cohen is going to be a crucial witness here for the prosecutors. Remember, he has kind of turned on Trump, but before being Trump's number one man, probably because he was just never paid back from anything, because the guy was just like, we'll get to it later, Mike. Just have another meeting, another sleazy meeting with the porn stars representatives. So that was essentially, his tack towards it. And then midway through the Trump administration, Trump essentially got kind of pissed off or Cohen, and then decided to turn on him, also under a fair bit of legal pressure. Bragg is also expected to call David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, as well as Hope Hicks, a former Trump aide, to shed light on the tumultuous period surrounding the payments. Trump said he also plans to testify in his own defense. Yeah, so the charges against Trump are all Class E felonies, the least severe category. So it's going to be a prison sentence of 4 years or less. And again, this is where he gets the political side of things here. Going to give you the moral outlook of it, or the legal outlook of it so far. It seems like this case, it's pretty broadly been considered for him to be the weakest case against him, the least severe case. The least severe category of felony in New York, essentially this improper campaign contributions and doing things that, as the Trump lawyer correctly did say, are not really illegal, though they are incredibly scummy, whether it be meeting or planning false stories or paying off hush money. This stuff, even with the in-kind campaign contributions, that there was a similar situation with a Democratic politician named John Edwards in the early 2000s, where he had paid money to keep his mistress silent, and he never declared it, and he was able to get off of that. But because of all this other stuff, they were able to raise it to not just a misdemeanor, which is what it was for him, but up to a criminal charge that they now again have to prove with all this other stuff. So it seems like it's going to be a tough uphill battle for them to the prosecutors, for them to make this work, this kind of conspiracy to influence the outcome of election case work effectively. But they have shown that they are, pretty competent, and they're able to, especially more competent than Trump's legal team at the moment. So that's definitely something to watch out. Polls have shown that the classified documents case has consistently been the most important one, although that is pretty severely delayed, as long as, this is really the only other case that has a chance at finishing before the election. And even if the worst case scenario happens, he gets locked up for 4 years, I think this is really going to, which I really highly doubt is going to happen, but I think, because they have an uphill, battle to prove that he should really get locked up for this at this level of crime, first of all, because, it was really an in-kind campaign contribution that even John Edwards was able to get off of when he had essentially the same thing happen against him. So it's going to be a tough battle for them to prove it, no matter what, especially at this raised felony level, which, Alvin Bragg was kind of able to artificially jack up there, I would say. Again, it's not the strongest case against Trump. And, even if it does get through, it's only 4 years. And the question is, what will it have? The question about the impact it'll have politically, I think, is also very, very big, because, people are going to read the instance of this case and say Trump was a scumbag who paid off porn stars to do better in the election. I already knew that, and I'm still considering voting for him or not considering voting for him. I think that is a very, very tough hill to climb, and it is something that they are not going to, they're not going to be able to deal with it really easily and really be able to paint that case of criminality really easily, as if they may be able to say for an instance of, find me 11,000 votes, like the call Trump made in Georgia and all the stuff that he's done to overturn the election, or the handling of classified documents, or the, Jack Smith case. I think all those are much more scary cases for Trump, even though he doesn't seem, even though this one may be finishing up in time for the election, and he has successfully delayed every other case so far. So that's essentially what's going on there with that Trump legal case, and it's a big win for the prosecutors to get all that included, all those extra meetings, those the additional hush money payment is a big win for the prosecutors to get that included in the hush money case there, but still an uphill battle for them in terms of trying to prove the criminality at such a high level of just making $130,000 hush money payment, proving that is in fact an in-kind campaign contribution. Still a big uphill battle for them. Do want to get into what's going on now more presently with D.C. at the moment. This is in the Financial Times. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson plans to hold votes on funding for Ukraine and Israel faces a growing threat as members of his Republican Party revived a bid to remove him from office. Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie on Tuesday said he would join Georgia Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, another firebrand Republican and Donald Trump ally, in pushing forward a motion to vacate Johnson for the speakership. Johnson should pre-announce his resignation so a new speaker could be selected, Massie said. Greene said on X that Johnson was serving Democrats and throwing her party into chaos by going to fund foreign wars. The comments came less than 24 hours after Johnson unveiled a plan for votes on funding for Ukraine, Israel, and other U.S. allies, a potential breakthrough after months of Republican opposition for new aid to Kyiv. And this essentially comes from, a long time built up of Trump-led opposition and kind of, populist right, whatever that means, led opposition to, funding for the war in Ukraine and kind of a vaguely America first ethos. But all it took was, because this really shows how much of this populist right is really just a Trump personality cult, in increasingly poorer and poorer disguise. All it took was Lindsey Graham essentially going up to Trump and saying, if you just say it's a loan, they're going to have to pay it back at some point, hypothetically, but with no legal attachments. And Trump was like, yeah, that's a great idea. We have to make him pay it back. That's perfect. And then he essentially just signed on to it. And then, we see now Mike Johnson and other, right-wingers continue to push it up. But some of the firebrands here are not exactly for it. Thomas Massie has probably been he's a hardcore libertarian, so anti, much government spending, pretty much all government spending. He is, given credit, principally come out in against this. But the threat to remove Johnson also puts his plan of foreign aid in peril, just as political and military leaders in Kyiv say its forces are running out of ammunition and funds in their 2-year-long war to repel Russia's full-scale invasion. And politically here, I think it's very, very fair that, and very, very smart that we just don't keep blindly giving weapons to Kyiv, and we are not, exercising any import, or we're not carrying any weight when it comes to any real, plan for peace in any situation. I've yet to see any sort of smart resolution or any resolution that other than just let's just keep throwing money into Ukraine. They're really have took an incredible toll of just all their kind of fighting age men have been killed to the point where now they're just having to find people who are 60 plus, and it's just really a tough situation. The fact that I think, it's a much broader conversation, but the fact the path that we have led the Ukrainians down has just been absolutely devastating to them over the course of this entire, 2.5, it was almost like 3 years now of a campaign. But yeah, there's no strategy. There's nothing, displayed there. And of course, Israel, I think, anyone listening to this podcast for more than 2 seconds, knows what I think about aid to Israel. But I think it's also important to look here on the political situation, because you have Johnson vowing to fight on for the bills, which could be put into a vote within days. They're trying. He essentially has to come in and beat the members of Congress who are trying to throw him out. And, the moment Marjorie Taylor Greene gets enough signatures to really push that vote to the floor, he's essentially screwed, because no Democrats are going to probably vote to save Johnson, or some may, if they, really care. It's a chaotic situation. So it's essentially what gets to the floor first, this vote to a motion to vacate for Mike Johnson, and how the Democrats handle that, or will they be able to vote first on the aid to Ukraine, and what do the coalitions look like? Because you'll probably be able to get a significant chunk of Democratic support for a Ukraine-Israel together aid package, but after that, you're probably going to see, bye-bye Mike Johnson. And it's very unlikely that if that happens, if the aid bill happens first, then the motion to vacate vote happens, it's very, very unlikely Democrats would vote to save him, because they want to see, just increased Republican chaos if they have any sense. Johnson, speaking just days after Iran launched his aerial attack on Israel, said he was a wartime speaker, adding, "I didn't anticipate this would be an easy path." The speaker is a Trump ally who flew to Mar-a-Lago to hold talks with former president last week, has for months struggled to hold together his party's warring factions, including isolationist Republicans opposed to further U.S. support for Kyiv and partisan conservatives reluctant to work with Democrats to pass any legislation. As a result, Johnson, essentially has a 1-vote majority here, because they got another Wisconsin Republican stepping down. As a result, Johnson is going to be increasingly likely to rely on Democratic support to pass the legislation or to keep his speakership. Any bills passed in the House will also need to pass Democratic-controlled Senate for heading U.S. President Joe Biden to be signed into law. Congressional Democrats in the White House have not said whether they'll get behind Johnson's latest plan. A White House official confirmed that Biden and Johnson spoke yesterday. John Kirby, spokesperson for the U.S. National Security Council, told reporters on Tuesday that at first blush, these proposals do get the necessary security assistance to Ukraine and Israel at a critical time right now. But the White House said they would be reserving judgment till they give more details. So I think, honestly, if you look at the situation here, again, it depends on the order of these bills. And whenever Marjorie Taylor Greene decides to go to the floor, Mike Johnson has to put that motion forward within 2 days. So it's obviously in his best interest to get that Ukraine/Israel aid up for a vote, get those details published, get them put out, and if they're at all reasonable, I would say it wouldn't be a big surprise that Biden and a majority of the Democratic Party come in and support it. But then the question is, Johnson is probably obviously cooked, but can he get enough Democratic votes to save him on the other side? And what would his legitimacy look like as speaker, behind that? So it is kind of a race right now. Who will get to the floor first to announce a motion to vacate, whether it be Marjorie Taylor Greene? Marjorie Taylor Greene would obviously do that, but then would Johnson be able to get to the floor before her to get that aid bill through? And then, how will Democrats respond? I think it's a very, very good bet. The Democrats put something, would strongly take a good look at supporting this, at least the, establishment trunk of the Democrats. I would say Pramila Jayapal and her progressive caucus, a good chunk of her progressive caucus will be in jeopardy there, or probably not support it, but a good chunk of the Democrats would be more than happy to put forth Ukraine and Israel aid. And again, any speaker working with the Democrats is going to get absolute revulsion from the Republican caucus, and even if the Democrats vote to save him, it still may not be enough Democrats voting to save him, and he still may be gone, and the Republican Party still may be thrown into chaos. So again, a lot of different things could happen, but it all depends who gets the floor first, who gets to put their motion forward first. Marjorie Taylor Greene and her motion to kick Mike Johnson out, or will Mike Johnson be able to put his aid bill for Ukraine and Israel to the floor? And even if he does, he's not in a particularly good situation, because he will almost certainly have to go with Democratic support, which in today's modern Republican Party is essentially a death knell for any House Speaker. So pretty important stuff, and stuff we're going to continue to keep a close eye on. But speaking of other things, we're going to be keeping a close eye on. This is in the Cradle. An Iranian military security official has revealed exclusively to the Cradle the U.S. contacted the Islamic Republic, and this is the same people, got pretty good source, great Middle Eastern journalism outlet, that has been asking the nation to allow Israel a symbolic strike to save face. So the U.S. essentially, this story is alleging, called Iran up and was like, can you just let Israel blow off a little steam to save face? So he added that Tehran outright rejected the proposal delivered by the mediators and reiterated that any Israeli attack on Iranian soil would be met with a decisive and immediate response. The reply was delivered directly to the Swiss envoy in Tehran by officials from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and not the Foreign Ministry. According to Cradle sources, the decision for the IRGC to reply directly was meant to send a strong warning to the U.S. So essentially saying, we're not fucking around with this. Don't try and give us a little, can you please just let Israel blow off a little steam here? No, we're not playing that game anymore. They have been very clear about, their little strategic patience thing, which is essentially just saying, doing nothing because we can't really see what we're going to get out of it. But also kind of letting Israel and the U.S. do whatever they want in the region. They are really adamant that that period in their foreign policy is over, and they're trying to go to serious deterrence now, and that was what that strike over the weekend was meant to represent. But yeah, this is a pretty kind of significant moment here, because it's another if this is at all true, and I think it's interesting either way that the Iranians are trying to leak this out right now, it does show that there are, strong desires in the Israeli camp to retaliate, but there also is pretty strong desires within the United States to mediate and to limit, especially with regards to Iran. I think it's much less strong with regards to just letting the Israelis do whatever they want with regards to Gaza, but in terms of an Iranian war that really would be negative to American interests, they are kind of horrified about Israel dragging them into a war that they really do not want to go into. So this comes in, this kind of mediation of almost, it really is. The simplistic analogies write themselves here. Like, this is like a spoiled kid with a dad in the United States that just lets them, is incapable of saying no to them and just has to let other people, beg other people to just let them accommodate their spoiled son in Israel. And Iran is kind of the other person, the third party in this, who's just saying, no, we're sick of doing this. We're sick of letting Israel do whatever it wants in the region. There's obviously a limit that they're willing to go. They're not going to, stand up for the Palestinians in any significant way, but they also don't want to see their interests and their, territorial integrity, first of all, but also their, various interests throughout the Middle East messed with by Israel and by extension, the U.S., because, again, U.S. they view, and probably Israel to a certain extent they view as well, as a power foreign to the region. The U.S., again, does not intend to take part in any military response. They confirmed, however, they expect Israel to inform Washington about response plans in advance. Israel has publicly vowed to respond to the Iranian operation this weekend, which saw the launch of hundreds of drones, ballistic and cruise missiles by the Islamic Republic in retaliation to the Israeli bombing of Iran's consulate in Damascus. The launch of so many missiles, cruise missiles, and drones into Israeli territory will be met with a response, said Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi on Sunday, speaking from the Nevatim Air Force Base in southern Israel, which was one of the three military targets successfully hit by the Iranian barrage. Which, interestingly, to that kind of barb from Israel to the Iranians, the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri Khani told State TV on Monday that the Tehran response to Israeli retaliation would come in a matter of seconds, as Iran will not wait for another 12 days to respond. No 72 hours heads up this for the Americans, this time. Iran is coming in for a response. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how, the Iranians are trying to, how the Iranians respond to a potential Israeli response, but most critically, what that response will be. And it's kind of interesting, almost laughable in a way, to see this, dealing with this kind of bargaining between the U.S. and the Israelis, and the U.S. just going around saying, please just let them blow off a little steam. And they were really angry. I promise we'll leave you alone. it shows how, I think, really how desperate the U.S. is to try and mitigate the Israeli response to Iran that they know is going to come, because they know how bad it could be. And also they know, the U.S. does, how unserious the U.S. or Israel is about any broader world peace, and they're really only out for themselves and starting to be a belligerent actor in the region. And I think time will only tell, how successful the U.S. is in mediating said Israeli response. And of course, Newsflash will be on that story for you. Also, we got to get to this. This is pretty incredible stuff here, really saving the best for last. Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Graham have been really on for The Intercept, the New York Times, and their really flawed reporting of the Gaza genocide. And now that a few stories have been filed, it's been a few embarrassments for sure for the New York Times, and there has been an internal leak investigation done by executive editor Joe Katz, which, according to the same leaks that went out to The Intercept, has just been calling all Middle East, North African staffers in the office saying, "Did you leak to The Intercept? Did you? I'm really serious. You could just tell us the truth," and just, again, specifically targeting these Middle East, North African staffers and, requesting their phone records and stuff and threatening them, and really just pissing off them to the point where, the Middle East, North African group of staffers at the New York Times made a collective statement decrying this kind of behavior. They finished the investigation, according to a Wall Street Journal report recently, with no clear identification on who the leaker is, but just a few days later, there is this leak in The Intercept. New York Times Gaza memo tells journalists to avoid words genocide, ethnic cleansing, and occupied territory. Really incredible stuff here. This again from Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Graham in The Intercept. The memo also instructs reporters to not use the word Palestine except in very rare cases, and to steer clear of the term refugee camps to describe areas of Gaza historically settled by displaced Palestinians expelled from other parts of Palestine during previous Israeli-Arab wars. The areas are recognized by the UN as refugee camps and house hundreds of thousands of registered refugees. The memo was written by Standards editor Susan Westling and international editor Philip Pan, and their deputies offers guidance about some terms and other issues we have grappled with since the start of this conflict in October. While the document is presented as an outline for maintaining objective journalistic principles in reporting on the Gaza war, so essentially, again, going contrary to UN definitions, on things like refugee camps to make them seem less bad for the state of the Israelis, and literally going, just denying the existence of the word Palestine and the territory of Palestine. This is some really serious stuff. I think it's the kind of thing that looks professional and logical if you have no knowledge of the historical context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, said Times newsroom source who was anonymous. But if you do know, it will be clear how apologetic it is to Israel. Issues over style guidance have been among a bevy of internal rifts at the New York Times over its Gaza coverage. In January, The Intercept reported on disputes in the Times newsroom over issues with an investigative story on a systemic sexual violence on October 7th, really going to pretty forensic lengths to debunk the story and show how really invalid it was. The leak gave rise to a highly unusual internal probe. The company faced some pretty harsh criticism, again, for allegedly targeting Times workers of MENA descent, and they concluded the investigation unsuccessfully this past Monday. So again, but this is some really incredible stuff, and this goes to, the thing where it doesn't seem like a lot, but actually it is, because you have the entire New York Times newsroom being told from top down in a way that many millions of people, the exact people that are turning on Israel and are most susceptible to be turning on Israel, these kind of, squishy, not super liberals, but, people who kind of are the decision makers, the key constituents in the Democratic Party, whether that be people, in the New York City, D.C. area, people in the suburbs of big cities, kind of these more affluent kind of anti-Trump liberals who are reading the New York Times on the day-to-day. they really get a lot of their opinions, formed about this stuff, whether it be domestic or international politics. And if they're seeing these little things like, let's not call it a refugee camp. Let's not call, Palestine a territory, even though it's a pretty widely recognized territory. If you look at, the world and the governments and institutions and things like that, let's not even use the words genocide, ethnic cleansing, or even occupied territory. Genocide and ethnic cleansing are one thing, but occupied territory is, it's a little ridiculous. All these little things, it seems very small, but it absolutely, like, an Israeli advocate or Israeli activist could not ask for a better situation than this. Supposedly objective coverage from a trusted source that is leaving out some of the key facts on the ground with regards to Palestine, but doing it in a very unbiased, very official way, just by, not even saying words. But again, it's like a lot of these cases of biases, it's much more about the words. They don't say the things that they leave out. And you can see that very, very clearly. So it's just like, just picture, for example, a 55-year-old white suburban woman kind of in the suburbs of a liberal city who has, kind of had a Republican past, but been pretty strongly Democratic since around the mid-Obama era. Just really into New York Times, really respects the New York Times, throughout the Trump administration, all the journalism they're doing, really, impactful, really impacted, really following the situation in Gaza, goes to the New York Times for all her news, and is seeing things that, they're not obvious, but they just tilt things in general, more and more and more. And these are some of those, catered to people in politics, I think it's important to say. And you can magnify that one 55-year-old white woman times about, 200, 500,000. Like, there's a lot of people who are like that, who are in that, kind of similar situation, who are key constituents in the Democratic Party base at this point, and are being completely misled in very, very subtle ways, but also very, very significant ways, especially when they're kind of added out through all these stories, multiplied through all these people, and through the period of 6 months. They actually turn out to be very, very impactful when it comes to manipulating sentiment about the reality of this conflict, in denying some pretty basic things. Like, for example, just using the word Palestine, saying that they're refugee camps. Like, I think it's a very, very clear and I think very, very disturbing situation here. All right, so beyond that, let's just go through some more details here. There's been some WhatsApp debates on the Jerusalem Bureau-led WhatsApp group, which at one point included 90 reporters and editors, became so intense that this debate here on this WhatsApp chat about the Times coverage, essentially saying, we really shouldn't be going out of the way to defer to what Israel wants, and then some people saying, no, it's fine. So Pan wrote on a November 28th WhatsApp message viewed by The Intercept and first reported by The Wall Street Journal. He essentially wrote, do not use the channel for raising concerns about the coverage. So again, where do you raise concerns? Among the topic of debate in Jerusalem was the Al-Shifa hospital attacks, statistics on Palestinian civilian deaths and how to refer to them, the allegation of genocidal conduct by Israel, and President Joe Biden's pattern of promoting unverified allegations from the Israeli government as fact. Many of the debates were addressed in the Times Gaza-specific style guidance and have been the subject of intense public scrutiny. And again, using words like slaughter, massacre, and carnage. This was another one from the memo here. They often convey more emotion than information. Think hard before we use them in our own voice, according to the memo. Can we articulate why we are applying these words to one particular situation and not another? As always, we should focus on clarity and precision, describe what's happening rather than using a label. Despite the memo's framing as an effort to not employ incendiary language to describe killings on all sides in the Times reporting on the Gaza war, such language has been repeatedly used to describe attacks on Israelis by Palestinians, and almost never in the case of Israel's large-scale killing of Palestinians. So, in the few days after October 7th, a few months after October 7th, really, it was always, the slaughter of innocent Israelis by Hamas terrorists. And then the moment, Palestinians start to get slaughtered and massacred and, carnage in the Gaza Strip, we need to think about these incendiary words we may be using. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. So really important stuff. And again, all this stuff builds up big time. Over hundreds of stories, over 6 months, and over hundreds of thousands of people who are reading this, who are key constituents in the Democratic Party, who are some of the people, in the political, in all the political coalitions of the country, probably the coalition that has been the most transitive on this issue from October 7th to today. And the New York Times has been one of the key pro-Israel bulwarks in a very subtle way, but a very effective way in terms of minimizing this conflict at every turn and being completely unaccountable to it. All right. So we got for you guys today. We'll be back soon. This is Newsflash.